and welcome to episode 31 of Skeptic Smash Talk. I'm your host, Jason Jones, and as I mentioned last week, Andi is away this weekend, so we found some time earlier last week to pre-record, so you didn't need to miss out on hearing her angelic voice. But also, I was joined this morning by my good friend and fellow skeptic, Brenno, who does a brilliant job of filling in the gaps in my skeptical knowledge base. So with that in mind, this week's show is massive. It's so massive, in fact, that it will be split into two separate volumes. Part 2 will be available on Thursday, I think, mostly because it will probably take me that long to finish the editing, so keep an eye out for that. And the show may feel a little weird this week, so basically what we did was I hit the record button and let loose on both occasions with Andi and Brenno, so it may feel like I've cut one of them off mid-sentence, but it's either been because the conversation has gone off on a massive tangent, and that's normally my fault, or the subject changed into something else. And to top it all off, I've staggered the parts with Andi and Brenno for no other reason except for that's what I did. Anyway, as we get into those segments, I'll introduce each segment so you know what's actually going on, just to give you a bit of a heads up. Now, before we get too far in and before we start, just a reminder, you can listen directly from the show's website, and that's skepticsmashtalk.com, and from the front page you can hear or play the last 3 main shows, and if you hit the blog link you can find all the posts and show notes relevant to the most recent shows. But for simplicity, you can always just subscribe via your most favourite podcast app. And if you want to keep in touch, you can follow and like the show on all the social networks that allow following and liking. And you can get all the contact information that you'll need. And again, that's skepticsmashtalk.com. As always, if you did in fact enjoy the show, please take a moment to leave a review and the appropriate amount of stars on iTunes or whatever that favourite podcast app of yours is. Just like David, Lala, Lucy Lou, Matthew and Daz have done, I very much appreciate the effort for those reviews. Thank you. I must apologise that I haven't acknowledged these before, but I only just learned that iTunes has a particular twerk that only lets me see reviews for the country that I'm logged in from. So please do keep the feedback coming in, and if it takes me a while to say thanks, that's the reason. Also, as Matthew did, if you can let me know if you found this podcast from another show, so that I can thank the relevant people. And finally, I'm really interested in any feedback for this week's show, especially this week with Brenno joining it as a guest. When I started the podcast, it was just myself, and it seems some people liked that and others preferred it when Andi came on board. So the next big jump for me is an investment in equipment that will let me have more guests and probably the occasional live podcast. So if you have an opinion, please drop me an email, and you can find that link at skepticsmashtalk.com. And I guess what I'm really looking for is opinions on whether or not I ditch the solo diatribes altogether, or do you still like them as a change dropped into the middle of the show somewhere? Or would you prefer them as a completely separate show altogether? And that's another option I've been looking into, but more to follow on that front as time goes by. Anyway, get in touch and let me know. Okay, and now that all the nice stuff's out of the way, I'm sorry to say that the first segment is me getting more and more pissed off than I probably need to with trolls. Enjoy. So, I've been rattling my brain for a few days now on how I should handle this. Part of me is saying let it go, and the other part of me is saying, nah, fuck it. It's a good story, and it's a learning point. I'm talking about hate mail. Well, to be quite precise, hate tweets. Okay, and to be clear, I do like getting messages of support, so don't take me wrong here. And to be honest, I also don't mind it when somebody corrects me. I know I'm not perfect, and sometimes my sources aren't as good as I want them to be. And, well, I've had more corrections than messages of support recently, but no matter what the content is, if a listener has taken the time and the effort and the energy to contact me, even to correct something that I've said or give me a different point of view, that's fine. It's actually encouraging. And honestly, from the bottom of my heart, I do thank everybody that does this. But then there's the trolls and the haters, especially on Twitter. And I know I had some problems on the Facebook page with somebody posting some really nasty stuff, but that pretty much stopped straight away when I blocked them. And I bet nobody actually knows this, but for about 30 minutes anyway, there was a forum page and a feedback page on the skepticsmashtalk.com homepage. Seriously, within 30 minutes, they've both been infested with bots and bigots, so I had to take them down straight away. Because what the fuck, right? This is a podcast for some guy that's got some crazy shit to say and needs an outlet. I don't have a team of IT boffins protecting my site or a team of journos researching my stories. It's just me and the mic and the good people like you that think that some of what I've got to say is either fun or interesting or a different point of view. But then we have the trolls, the people that do spend their days in their mother's basements eating cold double cheese and pepperoni pizza with a big gulp of Mountain Dew in their cum-stained sweatpants, waiting for somebody to post something that they think they have enough practice and patience in pretending to be insulted or offended by. Okay, before I do start getting too pissed off, when or if I have insulted or offended, it's either been absolutely deliberate, and you will have known this because I would have blatantly offended somebody, normally with the sentence with the words Trump or Clinton or Brexit or Popenchites, and you get my point, right? But if I say something that you as an individual take offense to, you can pretty much be sure that I'm not trying to offend any private individual. You know what? If Trump rung me up and said that he was in tears when I made a joke about the size of his cock, I would honestly be gutted that I hurt the feelings of a fellow human. And I would surely apologise, and upon evidence, I would broadcast from the highest mountains the songs of praise of the appropriately sized phallus. Now, I'm sorry to go on about presidential candidates' genitals or lack thereof, but it's important to this story, and I promise we will get to Trump's mini-me in due course. But before we do, I went to Liverpool Pub HT, and I've talked about this before. It's a once-a-month thing where 3 PhD candidates get up on the stage in a pub in Liverpool and for 10 minutes try and explain their PhD in non-technical terms, which is a shitload harder than it actually sounds. Anyway, last time there was a very interesting and very entertaining openly Marxist presenter named Christopher McMahon talking about his PhD in ideology and narrative engagement and moral agency in video games and the ability of the player to act within a virtual space as it holds significance as an individual, as they will be able to commit actions and fulfill roles that they are often prevented from doing in the real world. And I got to talking to him later on, and very briefly we discussed Twitter and the bridge dwellers, aka trolls, and we both scratched our chins wondering if the run-of-the-mill keyboard warrior gets their bravery and hate, for that matter, from the inability to remove themselves from their avatar, or simply put, because they can act like a right cunt on Grand Theft Auto, do they feel they can do so on social networks? But the mutual chin scratching was about all we achieved from that. But it did make me wonder. Then on Thursday, after a pretty shitty day, I come home to the news on the YouTube that Dr. Oz has given Dum Dum a clean bill of health. All that he needed to do was drop a few pounds, and being that they give his height and weight, that was for all intents and purposes pretty much my numbers. And for a second, I thought I was a little bit proud that I had the body of a presidential candidate. I pictured JFK. Even Ronnie had a bit of a decent body for a while. Or the King in the North, my hetero man fantasy, Justin Trudeau. But as the seconds passed, I recalled the in decline statue of Dum Dum from a month or so ago. You remember the ones. They popped up in LA and San Francisco and a few other places. It's the Emperor's New Clothes statue. A life-size effigy of Trump. And I remember saying when I first saw the picture, albeit slightly ashamed, I said, if I shave my head and make him look a little bit more pissed off, you have a statue of me. My wife and I laughed a little, and then I cried on the inside, and that was that. But on Thursday, after hearing about #LoserDonald on Dr. Oz, I remembered the statues and posted a picture on Twitter with the comment, shave his head and fix a cock size, and it's a spitting image of me. Now, if you know me, or if you've met me, you would be pissing yourself laughing at that comment, because it's true. It's actually comedy gold. But as I should have known, there will be some haters. And yeah, the expected pro-Trumpers did their ad hominem bullshit thing. For whatever reason, they all thought that I was some pro-Hillary bro or something. And most went off on that rant. But one guy sent me a message, and Oh, it was a loud and clear message. He was pissed off and offended, and he took the time to write me a very long message. This is what he said, in his words. There are legitimately people who have mutilated and undeveloped genitalia. These people suffer in silent shame. As somebody with differences of your own, I shudder to think that you find it acceptable to post a crass caricature of a presidential candidate that plays on people's misperceptions and finds humour in mocking persons that are different from them. You should be ashamed of yourself, and as an atheist to boot, shameful. Full stop. I'll be unable to listen to your podcast from this point forward. To which I replied, what's absolutely fabulous in this world that we live in is the freedom of choice. It's not compulsory to listen to my podcast, which is my podcast, a recording of my personal thoughts, feelings, and opinions. Unfortunately, you didn't see that I was actually self-deprecating, but you did manage to highlight that there will always be somebody that will take offense, no matter what the situation. Also, please explain how my belief or otherwise in a god and or gods reflects on my shitty humour. To be in your atheist club, do I need to conform to a certain set of standards, or was that just an attempt to try and insult me? ? I'm honestly curious. To which he replied, you were being self-deprecating about your penis size ? Strange. I find nothing redeemable, humorous, or appropriate about using perceived inferiorities in a way that might shame those who are actually fighting for equality. Your post is akin to using blackface, anti-gay slurs, etc. If you find nothing wrong, you cannot see my point, then you are 100% correct. Continue to mock for better or worse. I tend to give atheists the benefit of the doubt when being enlightened thinkers, even though I'm often proven wrong. And that, right there, my dear listeners, is where I got pissed off. I didn't feed the bridge dweller. I replied back with the simple words, thanks for your feedback. I'll discuss it on my next show. Okay, so I could pull this apart, and to be honest, that's what I was first thinking about doing. But to be fair, well, I couldn't be bothered. And I'm sure you couldn't be bothered listening to me do it. But we all know that he isn't a listener anyway. There's no way someone that's, well, according to his bio, a recovering Eucharist minister and free thinker for Trump. Okay, hold on. This is one of those times where if you take offense, it's mean. How the fuck can anyone call themselves a free thinker and a Trump supporter? That right there, my friends, is the moron's oxymoron. Anyway, what really got me pissed off, and it's not the first time I've seen this, so it must be in the Trolls Handbook somewhere, it is relating to a comment I make about a public figure's cock to me putting on blackface or making homophobic comments. Now, I don't give the furry part of a rat's ass that he had to drop in a little dig about my differences. So well fucking done. You have the ability to read a Twitter bio and find something that you can use and as an insult. I bet it was all that he could do to not call me an aspitard. But really, to take or equate me saying that I have a fat sloth of a body and a questionable sized cock as me being a racist or a homophobe, that is just extraordinary. And for a little while, I actually thought he meant what he was saying, but then it hit me. He was trying to draw me in. You see it all the time, and they are getting pretty fucking good at it too. But not this twit. He pulled the atheist card way too early. And when you do so, the atheist card has got fuck all hit points. He could have drawn me out on body shaming and done some more damage that way. But somebody else tried that and failed too. But where he fucked up was dropping the HRC card. He said in a tweet this time, quote, "Oh, the first pounding and cries of misogyny if such a HRC statue was erected. Hypocrisy of the left knows no bounds." And that right there, hypocrisy of the left knows no bounds. An array of words that when put into the Googleometer leads you directly to the wannabe professional troll's den of iniquity, Reddit, which sends you back to Twitter until you hit the infinite loop of xenophobia. So what's my point? Well, on Thursday, well, actually all of last week, I was getting a bit fed up and depressed with dealing with more crap than most people actually need to. And then thinking about my podcast and all the work that I need to do each week to produce it and find stories and test stories. And part of the testing of the stories that I do for interest is posting them on social media. And that's when the trolls come out of trolling. So normally what will happen is I'll find something, and if it's interesting to me, Andy and I might discuss it, and I'll post the links on Twitter or Facebook or wherever. And normally most people might respond or send a message or like or share or follow, whatever the case may be. And this helps me gauge how much interest there is. But then the bridge dwellers come along and just act like they only know how. And I thought, I just don't need this shit, especially right now, because I'm injured to the point where I can barely walk some days. So forget about running and cycling or training for marathons and multi-day adventures. My podcast is my creative outlet. It's my emotional outlet. It's what I do. And right now, it's all I have. And these thunder cunts are taking sport and making me miserable. But then on Friday, a mate of mine come into work. He used to work with me. But left to do something different. I'm not going to mention names or details. I know he listens, and some of the other listeners know who I'm talking about. But we talked about his new job and the differences that he makes in the community and society just by doing the job that he does. And that got me thinking about things. And then I saw a video that Ben Giroux made, and he's a 10-year-old that wrote the poem that I read and talked about in the start of episode 5, which seems so long ago. And now I thought about the people I knew that aren't here anymore. The guys that were with me in the army, and some of them just aren't here anymore. And now today, well, it's Saturday night, and I'm sitting here writing and thinking about this. I noticed on Twitter a trending hashtag. It was hashtag refugees welcome. So I joined in with a conversation. Well, I joined in with a tweet, and I wrote, why the fuck should a line on the map be the decision point on a human's future? We all come from Earth. And I put that because I still don't get why that line on the map is the decision point on the future of anybody. And yeah, you guessed it, the hate and the bigotry resumed nearly immediately. I'm not going to read out the replies. You know what they would be. Anyway, all of a sudden, I lost about 50 Twitter followers within minutes. And you know what? I don't care. Quite the opposite. I'm actually a little happy because it was like a weight off my chest. I realised that the few people I know or care about are good people. There's nobody in my life right now that I don't consider to be a decent person. Just like you, very few people that are listening to me now bang on about bullshit like this and support me and correct me when I'm wrong. I don't need the 20,000 followers on Twitter or the million downloads. I don't want to keep up with Kim or be famous like Rogan or Justin or Taylor or Rihanna, Selena or JT. And you want to know something? I don't even know who the fuck half these people are, but according to Twitter, they are the most important people on the planet. And let me wind up this rant on this point. On the list of Twitter's top 100, taking away product accounts like MTV or Google and the media pages, all but 2 people in that top 100 list are the word remembers or the word singerers or the word regurgitators and the reality TV appearances or the sports ball players. We're marooned on a speck of dust travelling towards the unknown through an infinite universe. And we spend our time hovering over the like button or ready to hit the lols emoticon just in case Justin Bieber says something that we have to heart or like or lol so he knows that we love him. Or better yet, be at the ready with the Dummy's Guide to Bridge Dwelling for when some fat prick with a podcast tries to convince the world that he has a bigger cock than Donald Trump. Okay, so in this next part, Andria joins me to discuss the safe return of the besieged Russian scientists who were surrounded by a fierce gang of polar bears. Now, there was actually 5 scientists, including 2 couples, because why not, right? Well, luckily there was a flagship fairly close by that came to their rescue. Have a listen. Okay, so this next story is something, Andrea, you sent me this one originally.
Oh, which one's that one then?
This was, so when you sent me the story, when you sent me the link, there were some Russian scientists trapped, actually besieged in a weather station by some polar bears. Now, I'll read the story actually because everything's good. They're all safe and sound, but let me read the article. So it reads, Russian scientists have driven away polar bears that besieged their weather station on an island in the Arctic Ocean for 2 weeks.
That's a long time, that really, 2 weeks, especially when you're stuck in one place.
Yeah.
And you can't get out, and you're looking out the window seeing a polar bear like just looking at you.
Yeah. Well, let me go on, because there's a bit more in there actually, because it's not as bad as it's not as bad as they thought it was going to be anyway. So a nearby ship was able to reach the island and supply the scientists with dogs and flares to scare off the bears.
The dogs were to scare off the bears?
Yeah.
How did that work out for them?
Well, let me go on. Not so good. So this was in the Guardian actually. So the 5 scientists based at the weather station on the island in the Kara Sea north of Siberia, so it's a cold place, were encircled by 10 adult bears and some cubs. A female bear had taken to spending its nights beneath the station's window, and one of the 2 resident dogs was killed late last month.
I like the fact you said, so it's a cold place. We're talking about polar bears.
Well, yeah. It's going to be one of those shows, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. So one of the polar bears just decided to camp under one of the windows. Yeah. They found that their little comfy spot. Yeah. And wasn't moving for love nor money.
Not
blessed.
At all. So it does that. Well, so we've lost a dog, but let me go on. So the 5 personnel, 2 married couples among them, and that's strange in itself, actually.
Yeah, it is actually.
But, well, it's a remote place, so why not? Anyway, they run out of flares, which they use to deter. Well, they say in the Guardian they say predators, but I'm pretty sure the only predator up there are the polar bears. I don't think the penguins are that vicious.
I've never seen an episode of Attenborough's Killer Penguins.
Anyway,
Penguins look pretty cute.
Yeah. Anyway, so, according to reports, the next supply ship that could bring dogs and flares to the island was due in about a month. The local news agency had said early on Tuesday, but the flagship of Russia's research expedition fleet happened to be passing nearby and was able to stop at the island, and so they dropped off some flares and electronic sirens and some firearms that they could use to ward off the polar bears.
Where were the personnel from? Sorry, are they Russian?
Yeah, Russian weather researchers.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah. I'm surprised about the dogs. That's actually something they use to deter polar bears. To be fair, I don't know what I thought they did use to deter. I don't know whether I just...
Well, I did know they always carried firearms with them, and there have been a lot of polar bears actually shot by...
In actual fact, that's probably would have been my only guess. But yeah. I didn't think about the dogs. I mean, did the dogs just bark and they do one?
Yeah.
So
because if you can imagine, so in that region, dogs aren't a native animal, and so you've got the apex predator being the polar bear, and all of a sudden you've got this. I don't know what dogs they use, but obviously, dogs' barks are quite loud and vicious. Yeah. So it would be something that could scare them off, I guess.
What if they had a tape recording of a dog barking? If they'd gone. Just played that behind the door.
Don't know. Not know.
I think I might have tried that probably day 2.
Yeah. But the best part of this story is, so the person, I'm not going to try and pronounce their names. The Russian names are a bit of a tongue twister at the best of times, but they were instructed to take every measure to protect both the animals and the humans at the weather station. Yeah, that actually did make it a good story for me, and that's why we've included it in there. Originally, we were going to include it because some bears had learned to besiege and go into that siege warfare, which I think is awesome to start with. Yeah. And that big old mama polar bear was keeping an eye on the window of night time to make sure people don't jump out.
It's not a really... It is a nice story, that, though, isn't it? The fact that it's a happy ending. Yeah,
the fact that they were instructed, and it was in their thoughts to make sure the polar bears were looked after as well, because they are, they're a protected species, and we're running out of them.
Yeah.
Next, Brenno and I discuss how he found skepticism, even suggesting that he may have once been a follower of the woo-woo. We touch on a bit of science fiction and the scientific method, and I suggest that one of my scientific heroes is probably best kept away from Twitter. Have a listen. Okay, so in the studio with me now is a very special guest and fellow skeptic, Kevin Brenno, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, and thanks for having me.
No, absolute pleasure. You're a skeptic. You're a fairly achieved athlete, so you do a lot of running, a lot of ultra distance running and fell running and all that sort of stuff.
Yes, I get about.
Yeah, and also, strangely, a vegetarian. You're one of those weird hippies. And you're sitting in the hippie seat, so that's all good. So
not cross-legged.
No. So, let's just start. Give us a bit of a background. When did you kind of get into skepticism itself? Is it something you sort of fell into, or did you sort of have an epiphany at one stage?
A bit of both, really. Growing up, I was interested in science and science fiction. I really sort of loved science fiction books, even things on television like Thunderbirds, and I really loved drawing those comics. And but I went to a Catholic schools, and sort of the religious side of things. And growing up, I was quasi-religious, kind of Christian-y, but not practicing and stuff.
Was your family strong sort of religious background?
Yeah, Irish Catholics.
Yeah.
But also, I was very questioning when you get to teenage years. I went through a brief phase where I went, slightly woo, which is a bit disturbing, where you kind of, reading too many unexplained magazines and, being a bit sort of cynical about things and, buying into conspiracy. I mean, reading, not Chariots of the Gods, but stuff like Graham Hancock's book, where he espouses things like, pyramids on Mars and that kind of thing, or, ancient alien things. And, I lapped that up. I thought it was just like really good because...
So straight into all the good woo.
Oh, all the good stuff.
The big woo.
The sort of,
What about, what's his name? Is it David Icke?
Not so much David Icke.
Yeah,
no, I think even when I saw him on the Wogan show, I thought, this guy's gone a bit too far. And I think to sort of like a late teenage mind, that's quite appealing, isn't it? That kind of there's something other than mundane reality, and it's down to a poor understanding of science as well. I didn't really understand the scientific method, never heard of it. This is sort of like the late 80s, towards the early 90s. And then went through a bit of a hippie phase where I was kind of getting into...
Did you get out of that? Come on, be honest.
Yeah, very quickly. Stone circles and visiting ancient sites. I don't know where it's come from. I think it's just I was easily swayed and led. It was kind of like flitting from one thing to another. And maybe that's part of that searching thing that you go through life. You're looking for those, I don't know, answers.
That's actually quite a reasonable explanation.
But to cut to the chase, what got me into skepticism? I didn't really know what skepticism was. Maybe it was an epiphany. I think it was things like seeing Richard Dawkins' The Root of All Evil on Channel 4, where, he since went on to publish The God Delusion from that. And it was just one of those moments. And I think it was the last bit where it was going off, where he quoted from the first bit of Weaving the Rainbow. And I found that quite a moving experience. I thought, gosh, this is right, and so from then on, it kind of just blossomed from there. You start reading more things, and obviously, you're finding more things on the internet. I just found the whole thing eye-opening. It was revelationary.
Did you go through a phase of cynicism before skepticism, or sort of transition through there, or were you able to skip past that?
I think I went through a bit of an arsey phase where you do sort of, you feel like you
know it all.
Yeah, that sort of like arsey atheism where you think, anybody who doesn't believe are clearly misguided and I've got the full facts at their fingertips, and that's unfortunate thing.
Yeah. Well, it still happens even with, I mentioned Dawkins before. I think Dawkins is, as an evolutionary biologist, I think Dawkins is an absolute genius, and I stand in his shadow when he comes to atheism. I think quite often, he does more harm than good, especially when he gets on Twitter. This is all pre-stroke. I think he's calmed down a little bit.
Yeah, it does seem to have got off the radar a little bit. Yeah, Twitter's not his ideal format. It does happen, especially in this field of evolution, where it does come with a lot of hammer from loony creationists.
Oh, yeah.
And it must be frustrating because I think it's just he is forthright and pulls no punches and doesn't really seem to care that some people might take umbrage at, being told things they don't want to hear.
Yeah.
But I think at the time, was it 2006 when The God Delusion came out? Yeah, it would be because it's 10th anniversary. And obviously a few years after 9/11, it was that pivotal moment, wasn't it? Sort of a turning point. And I know Sam Harris said the end of Faith was perhaps a year earlier.
Yeah.
And then from Dawkins, it was then on to sort of this, the whole new 80s and movement of the Four Horsemen, like Dan Dennett and Christopher Hitchens, who I thought was just so articulate. And I know he had some dodgy ideas about Iraq. And
I think everybody does, and that's something can be a little bit annoying, especially with the haters. They'll say, and I've just done I'm guilty of it myself. I've just said it with Dawkins. Is they'll do that ad hominem sort of attack on somebody, and they'll say, Dawkins. What I just said actually, Dawkins is a great biologist, but because some will accuse him of being a misogynist, ergo, what he says about atheism can't be true, which is absolute bullshit. So, everybody, because we're human, we're fallible, because that god of thunder called Thor who invented us kind of made us fallible, so we do that. And, so Hitchens, I'm upset that I didn't know about Hitchens when Hitchens was alive. Yeah. So now everything that I'm learning about him is, it's all post-mortem, and same with Carl Sagan, and next to my bed, I've got Cosmos. That's everybody, well, not everybody, people have the Bible next to their bed. Yeah. I've got a copy of Cosmos there, and that's what I read of at night time, and he's my hero.
I do actually remember seeing Cosmos growing up. A vague memory of it. Obviously, the spaceship scenes. Which and I've since got it on DVD. I'm shameful I've not got around to watch the whole thing again, which is...
you're talking about the original series, yeah. Did you see the new series with Neil deGrasse Tyson? Fantastic. It's not the same. Co-written. So Carl Sagan's wife co-wrote, co-produced as well. So there's that continuity there. But obviously Tyson... Neil deGrasse Tyson brings a completely different character to the role, so fantastic. Not the same. Yeah. Not better, not worse, but, really worth having a look. It's on the Netflix if you've got the Netflix.
Yeah. And also the stuff, more recent discoveries of cosmology, they would be in there.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Don't think does he talk about Pluto? Don't know that. And I still have a go at him. Pluto. Yeah, the man who killed Pluto. Do you know, I was listening to something, I think it might have been on Dr. Carl. So it turns out all the reasoning they put into deplaneting Pluto is all wrong. So they never had to do it. They're not reclassifying it.
So it's still a dwarf planet.
It's still a dwarf planet.
One of many now.
Yeah. Okay, so away from the tangent, where were we?
We were just talking about Neil deGrasse Tyson and Cosmos. But getting back to how do you discover skepticism? Yeah, from then on, reading stuff, Dawkins books and Hitchens. It was about the time where the British Humanist Society were starting the Atheist Bus campaign, Aaron Shireen. Yeah. In response to adverts she'd seen on buses. So she just wants to do a positive spin. There's probably no God. I can't remember the slogan now. A few years back, don't want to enjoy life. Yeah. Fair enough. A lot of people took it the other way. But I'd just seen an advert saying, she's doing a talk in the Crown upstairs in Liverpool, Merseyside Skeptic. I was like, sounds interesting. Went along. Lovely person. They did a great job. And interesting bunch of people. I thought, this is pretty cool. I sat around with a few beers, talking about stuff I'm interested in. But it was interesting because I knew I was really out my depth intellectually, because speaking to a few of the guys, really knew the stuff, and I didn't find it intimidating. I found it sort of like really, really sort of like encouraging and interesting. That, and from then on, I think you just start thinking about, I'll listen to the podcast and I'll check out the blogs, and I think it just all comes in from there, doesn't it? You start pulling at different sources. What's this about homeopathy? And God, I've never heard that before, and I always thought it was something else. And then from then on, sort of, you start reading about logical fallacies and, like you said before, ad hominem, and how those affect and corrupt debate, and how they're used by woo masters to sort of, weave their magic into enticing you to the snake oil. Yeah. And how to look out for those things, and just to be questioning and to doubt, and to to be aware of how things can be manipulated and how these are selling these things to you. And I know Marsh this PR thing, but so again, sort of spiraling off there again. There's just lots of these things that you can just pluck out, and then it becomes sort of like you've gained a sort of a toolkit then, an intellectual toolkit, and it's really good. You can detect the bullshit when you see it, and you hope you can, but also understanding that we are fallible, as you mentioned before, looking out for those things, because I think Byron said the easiest person to foolish yourself, and you've got to realise that all the time, that you may think, I've got a handle on this, I know where it's going. You never know anything. You've got to keep sort of like that toolbox, those tools sharp, and don't always do it. But I was like anybody else. I'll buy into stuff, and I think, which we'll probably come to when it comes to running in a moment, and I certainly have done in the past with other things. But it's just about being aware and trying to be a good thinker.
See, I think I got to a point at one stage when, so I said before, that line between cynic and skeptic, where, and I guess I struggle with it a little bit still. Is that so? If I read something in the paper, depending on the paper now, or not even depending on the paper, even if I see something on BBC News, they're getting quite bad at their fact checking. So now I'm finding myself, rather than look for, so if I read something in on the BBC webpage, I go naturally looking for 3 or 4 different sources to try and come up with that one story, which is, it's good in a way, but I'm depriving myself of learning other things or reading other articles, because what I'm doing is spending, rather than 2 minutes reading an article, I'm spending 10 or 20 minutes finding out whether what they've said is bullshit, or looking for the bullshit in the story as well. So that's another tool that I think everybody's got to keep those tools sharp. Some of them you've got to sort of put away for another day and just enjoy reading and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think the problem arises sometimes is when you're dealing with people who do have quite, not entrenched beliefs, but they have a particular diet they follow, or they've always sworn by a certain medication with its miraculous effect. And to sort of disillusion people it's never nice. And if it's not doing them any harm and stuff, you think, okay, get on with it. But it's whether they've made an informed choice, which is kind of none of my business, really. But if they're pushing it on other people or going to harm other people, more importantly, I think that's when you need to sort of like challenge and have the tools at your disposal to do so. We touched on homeopathy thought, and that was, I got involved with the 1023 campaign, the very first overdose.
Yeah. So you were a part of that. You went on the mass overdose.
The first outside.
Did you survive?
Yeah, unfortunately. It was arsenic as well.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry. Keep going.
Yeah, so just understanding what homeopathy was and how preposterous it was.
Yeah.
And it's the funding that the NHS spend on it.
Thankfully now, so Wirral have, Liverpool have stopped.
Mm-hmm.
Can't remember if the decision's due now for Wirral. Good Thinking Society.
You went to that meeting, didn't you?
Yeah. And that's an eye-opener, and I really encourage anybody, if you want to know what happens in these things, if you want to understand how entrenched people are in the woo, go to one of those consultation meetings. It is absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing.
Well, I really like what the Good Thinking Society have done, and also, the work that most of our skeptics do, where, rather than sort of sat in a pub and talking in an echo chamber amongst ourselves, say, oh, it's all terrible. They get out there and they're active.
Okay, so we're going to pick up on that conversation a little bit later on, and that's going to go into the next episode as well, as I said, coming out later in the week. But next, Andria joins me again by the magic of clever editing, and we talk about a new invention that will help get medication and vaccinations to areas that normally wouldn't be able to get them without refrigeration. Okay, so moving on to the next story. This is another good story that's been slightly overreported. I'll explain that towards the end, but good story nevertheless. And it's from the BBC, and it reads, a 22-year-old British student has invented a mobile fridge that could save millions of lives across the world.
Wow.
Yes. William Broadway, and his invention is called the Isobar, has been designed to keep vaccines at the ideal temperature while in transit in developing countries.
Oh, what a brilliant idea.
Better than that, he doesn't plan to make money from the creation, so he's decided not to patent. Now, that's where the over-reporting of this comes into, and I'll get to that at the end. But it's not... So the idea, the process that he's improved, to be fair, he's improved this process and miniaturized it really quite nicely. But it's a process that Albert Einstein actually patented, I believe, in the 1920s. Anyway, going back to but
can I just interject here?
Yeah.
What impresses me is, first of all, is a 22-year-old.
Yeah.
So he's a very young, smart guy. He's obviously very worldly wise to actually understand that there's a need for it. But also, Albert Einstein patented it, but this guy
he certainly made improvements to it. Yeah.
Do you know? And he picked up on the fact that this technology existed.
Yeah.
Let's use it. And I mean that's fabulous, isn't it?
And a few things that he said. So in his words, he said, "I don't think that it should be patented to restrict use. It should be a basic human right, in my opinion, to have vaccination," which is absolutely,
that's
this is
so
what we need.
refreshing to hear, and from such a young mind. I mean, he can just do brilliant things. That's just amazing.
And not that it, like I say, so this is based on something that Einstein had. There's a few different stories behind it. Some say that Einstein was a partner and had his name on the patent because he was at the time working in the Swiss Patent Office, and he knew the ins and outs of how to get a patent through. So one of the stories is that somebody else invented it and approached Einstein to actually get the patent.
That's a story for many different things in past history, though, isn't it? I'm sure the telephone had the same thing, didn't it? Was there not something that had pretty much the same?
Not the telephone. The light bulb. The radio. Everybody says that Marconi invented the radio. It didn't. It was Tesla had invented the radio.
Yeah.
The light bulb was Edison, but he invented the DC light bulb, which wouldn't work on AC power as we know it today. And that was Tesla. There was a lot of things that Tesla had either invented or improved that he never got the credit for.
Can I just ask the question?
What?
This actually might be slightly off topic, but in the UK where you got a 3-pin plug. Yeah. And in Europe, you got a 2-pin plug. I don't know what you have in Australia and America.
3-pin in Australia.
Why is that? What's the
third
different?
Pin's an earth.
So Europe just say fuck it. We don't need an earth.
Don't need earth. We'll be right.
Fry.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Anyway, back to the vaccination.
So where were we? So he says, he's saying, I make things every day for people who have everything. He's an industrial design technology graduate.
Oh, right, okay.
So that's where that comes from. He makes things every day for people who have everything, and he wanted to make something for people who have next to nothing.
Oh, wow.
And his quote there about it, it's a basic human right.
Oh, what a good use of his brain.
Yeah, and he won, his design has won the annual James Dyson Award, which is open to students across the world. And one of Dyson's big things is that it has to be a simple design. It has to be something that actually solves a problem, not
has a use. You don't create a problem to fit something that you just invented.
Exactly, kind of. Yeah. And as we know, sort of a little bit going off topic now, but we know that it's hard to get vaccines and medicines themselves into the third world countries and into some of the harder places in Africa.
Still amazes me in this day and age.
Well, somebody, I don't know the full ins and outs of this, and it's just sort of come into my mind, but somebody approached, I believe it was Coca-Cola. I don't know if it was Coke or one of the other, Pepsi or whatever. I'm fairly sure that it was Coke, and they worked out that in a delivery of Coke to one of these outreaches, if they took one bottle out, they can put enough medicine in. I think this was diabetes medicine. They could put enough medicine in for that small village for 6 months.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and nobody, and because obviously the Coke is going to be transported, or other cola product.
It's going anyway. So So really, what's the issue? I mean, totally ignorant here. But what's the issue? Is it the cost of transportation?
The cost of transportation is a problem.
Or is it people to actually administer the medicine? And
No. So in inoculation, the vaccination, most of them, they call it subcutaneous. So it's just under the skin. It's not in intravenous. So they don't need to find a... The easiest thing is they just jab it on your butt muscle or something, or big
nice
lead
big fatty muscle.
But you need to have a lot of these vaccines. They're alive. Whatever the vaccination against, they're putting a very small amount of that, whatever it is, into your body. So it's a live substance that you're being inoculated with.
Yeah, but that is the thing with vaccines, though, isn't it?
Yeah, so they need to have it in a climate-controlled...
Hence why this is quite an ingenious idea.
Yeah, exactly.
So these are basically like mini fridges then.
Yeah.
I mean, are we talking like a little small cylinder thing? Or are we talking like a little mini fridge that you have in your little room? It's like a little mini
fridge. You remember those 5-litre beer kegs that I had?
Yeah.
About that size.
Oh, right, yeah.
And the design looks like a big, wouldn't it be easier?
Does it hold its own power then? In order to keep it cold?
Yeah, so let's get to that. So what it does is, so it can maintain the temperature anywhere between 2 and 8 degrees for about 30 days. And what it does is they heat ammonia and water together to create ammonia vapors.
Oh, wow.
This is released into a chamber where cooling is now. So ammonia vapor or ammonia gases is currently used in industrial refrigeration now.
Yeah.
But to get it down to that size to make it work is nearly impossibility.
Right, yeah.
So he's been able to find a way of doing that. And then after the 30 days, give it another charge of energy, and it vaporizes that water and ammonia again, and away you go. So it can go on for a little while. Now, Will says that he was inspired to start work on a portable fridge unit in 2012 when he visited Cambodia and parts of Southeast Asia. And I've been into those countries, and if you're talking really rough jungle sort of territory out there, so you can see why there's a need there.
No, it's great that he's actually been able to go out there and visit these areas and actually see an issue. I mean, a lot of people just go travelling, don't necessarily take heed of what's going on, or they feel like they don't know how to help. But this guy's obviously took something that he had and made a difference.
I think that's why Dyson sort of looked at this, because it's a very simple solution. As I said, so this is 1920s technology that nobody really adopted.
Yeah. So nobody picked it up and ran with it and made it happen in where it's helpful.
No. Yeah. So one of the things with ammonia gases is if you breathe it in, it's not very good.
So it's just making that containable and not an issue in terms of health and safety.
So I mean, in the 1920s, you remember from last week and the week before, because you're a very ardent listener to the. Do you ever listen to the podcast?
As you're talking, yeah.
Anyway, so the last 2 episodes I talked about Thomas Midgley Jr. and his 2 inventions that absolutely ruined the planet. That being the addition
I remember.
You remember? You do listen, don't you?
I do.
No, you don't.
No, I don't.
Anyway.
No.
So in the 20s, so we've got Uncle Albert making or patenting his ice ball invention. At the same time, Midgley's come up with his CFC gases, or 5-10 years later, Midgley's come up with his CFC gases, which aren't poisonous to humans, not very good for the atmosphere, but not so. Beforehand, fridges were exploding and causing fires and deaths, and
so are Samsungs.
It's actually, we're going to go off topic again.
Sorry.
But I love this time of year normally. This time of year normally, everybody that's not an Apple fanatic is going apeshit about Apple fanatics and all that sort of, and how we're suckered into the marketing and all that sort of bullcrap. And most of them have the Samsung phones, the Galaxy phones or whatever.
Yeah.
They're not saying anything at the moment.
No.
Even though Apple have come up with them stupid fucking earplug things.
They'll never stay in your ears.
No.
And you will literally lose them looking at them.
They're the exact same design basically as the corded ones that they have now.
They fall out every 5 seconds.
You can't I can't chew while I'm wearing them. As soon as I try and eat something, the little shits fall out.
Stop eating with your ears. Yeah. Anyway, back on the topic.
Anyway, so let's finish this off. So
there's one thing I want to know is why was it over-reported?
Well, so what they're saying is that Will's invented this system and going on about how wonderful, and I'm not saying that he's not wonderful. I don't want to take anything away from him, but what he's done is taken something that was designed in the 20s.
Well, I will
improved it, so he would never get a patent.
But what I will say is, I think this was reported by Newsbeat.
Let me see who had it.
I think this was BBC Newsbeat.
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
and what I will say is, Newsbeat is designed for young listeners.
Fair enough.
So, whereas you're quite particular in making sure all the facts and the information are full on correct, they just want people who are around that age and younger, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, just sit there and listen to a news slot.
If it inspires people, that's fine. But I think we still need a little bit of that honesty in reporting as well.
I don't take that away. But I mean, all right, it may not be. Yeah.
I see what you mean.
Yeah.
I totally understand what you're saying. But anyway, let's finish it off. So in the BBC Newsbeat, what they're saying is, so this is what Will's saying still, and it's hard to sort of read what he's saying and still think that he's still such a young guy. Anyway, he's saying that there's a potential for non-medical use, which could be monetized in the Western world. And he's saying it's risky, but there's potential for commercial cooling, and it would be great if they could make something like that to take on a 5-day trip where you have no power. And again, that would be fantastic if you think when we go camping and things like that.
Yeah.
And that's something, again, so they're saying that they're reporting the monetization of it as a bit of a negative thing, where it should actually be a positive thing. If he can license this out to somebody, so if he can get Dyson or GE or somebody to actually license these out.
Yeah, I think what they're getting at there is, one, that it's not out of the interest of money, which is very, you've only got to look at your news feeds on all your social media and it's greed.
Yeah.
But secondly, there's a lot of things that don't get funded and don't get anywhere because they want big buyers. They want big. It's got to be how much money is it going to make me?
Yeah.
This guy's just saying, I don't give a shit
how
much money.
Yeah, absolutely
so
agree,
I think that's worth reporting.
But, no, I get what you're saying, but what I'm saying is if he licenses the technology to somebody like GE and says, right, you can make and market miniature 5-day cooling cartridges, but for every cartridge you sell, you have to make 10 of these isobars or something like that.
That would be brilliant. That would be brilliant, yeah.
But anyway, good on him, and I really do hope that it's the start of something really good and a way to get medicines in good condition out to especially the third world. And we've been able to eradicate polio's completely, well, not nearly disappeared off the planet.
Yeah, I say well done, but please don't stop. You're young enough to make a difference. Go for it and keep that mindset, because no matter what, you'll make your money, but you got the right thoughts.
Okay, and to finish off the show for the week, Brenno and I talk about his diet and how he gets his energy that he needs as an elite athlete. And keep in the back of your mind that the rest of the discussion with Brenno and some more news with Andria will be uploaded just as soon as I can get it edited and loaded up onto the internet. And that's probably going to be Thursday. Okay, so your diet, Brenno. That's another interesting thing, because apart from being a skeptic, so you're an athlete, you do a lot of ultra distance running, which we'll get onto. But you're
not used to being called an athlete, but
if you've got an England athletics card, you're an athlete, and that's what I say because I've still got mine.
Excellent.
So your diet. Let's talk about your diet for a moment, because it's not unusual for an athlete to be vegetarian, or vegan, and in fact, in the distance running world, it's quite common.
Yeah, it does seem to be some kind of the likes of Scott Jurek, Rich Roll, and I forget the woman's name. She's an excellent ultra runner. Something about the vegan diet. I don't know what it is. Whether I don't know. Yeah,
and when you look at the Mexican tribes, Tarahumaras, they're the natural born runners, if you like. I mean, most of their, not by choice, but most of their diet is beans and corn and things like and grains, and they run extraordinary distances.
I think some of the Ethiopian runners, is it teff? Cornmeal. It's some kind of grain that they grind down, real carb hit.
Yeah.
So I think by definition, a vegetarian diet is predominantly carbohydrates, fruits, vegetables. All good energy sources for running. I suppose a good fat from seeds and nuts comes into play. And there's a whole protein thing, which is more for muscle repair, recovery.
So that's important as well, the protein. Where do you find it hard finding protein, or do you need to supplement that with sort of whey protein or something like that?
Well, thankfully, since I first started being vegetarian, things have improved a lot more. You've got, apart from relying on things like tofu and back in the day, rudimentary soya products. You've got the whole Quorn range and Linda McCartney's, and supermarkets' own brands started doing those sort of meat substitutes. And they're really good. They're low fat, high fibre, lots of protein, and there's always the bit where, why eating fake meat when you eat the real thing? I don't know.
Well, let's go back. Let's go back to the beginning. How long have you been? You're vegetarian, aren't you? Not vegan.
Lacto ovo vegetarian.
Yeah. So explain that because
it's basically you will eat eggs, free range if
that's
possible.
The ovo part.
That's that.
Yeah.
And lactose, obviously, milk products, cheeses, and milk.
And when did that start?
Well, I can't pinpoint exactly. I can remember the year. It was 87. I do know why. I think at the time I was kind of like really into the Smith and Morrissey, the whole meat is murder thing. And I thought, what's all this all about? And I think because I'm not saying it was an idol or sort of like a musical guru, but you kind of stray towards these people. I mean, I was a big boy fan growing up as well, so I must have had this thing of like, you latch onto outsiders, or certainly I did at the time. And I thought, what's all this, vegetarian thing? None of my friends are vegetarian. I came from a working class council estate.
In 87, you were just out of high school or
couple of years. I finished in 84, so I was still like 18, 19, about 19, I think it was.
Yeah, so that would have been unusual in that era. It
was definitely a fringe thing, especially St Helens. You get to Liverpool, even then it's like a few cafes dotted about where you could perhaps get something. But, and it's obviously a puzzle to me. My mum at the time and obviously friends. That was a really weird thing to be.
Sure,
because I used to eat quite a lot of meat.
Yeah.
The old meat and 2 veg and pans of stew on the go.
The proper English diet,
Indeed.
Everything boiled to greyness.
And then I don't know where that led from there. I think it was just kind of you're trying to be sort of like a cool teenager, I suppose. You've got that sort of little quirkiness about it's vegetarian.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just that. It was also the ethical part as well. You do get the sort of thing where you think, I've got a pet here. I wouldn't eat my pet, so why don't I? Extrapolate that sort of eating other sentient creatures.
Yeah.
Cows and pigs, etc.
Did you get in those times smartasses like me who used to come along with, well, if you don't eat the pig becomes extinct, that sort of argument? Did you have those false fallacy arguments at the time, or did people kind of leave you alone?
No, I think people just kind of think you're just a little bit odd and they don't really get their head around it. I mean, you get the odd questions like, what do you eat, where do you get your protein from? And then, well, it's natural and we've got canine teeth, etc. And these are, a whole reasonable arguments.
Sure.
We are omnivores.
Yeah.
And we've got along very well eating meat. It's almost like a luxury to be vegetarian, really, because in certain parts of the world, you've got to eat what's available.
Sure,
and that is meat.
Yeah,
and it's hard for me to be sort of like righteous and stuff like, it's really bad to eat meat, man. Well, some people don't have that choice.
Exactly. And I think in the Western world, not so much now, but in the time, in the late 80s, in the 90s, it was, the meat. So the American, the Australian, the English diet was, meat was the main part of the meal, and the vegetables were supplementary to meat, whereas in just about to the dawn of time, meat was a supplementary product to your vegetable and your grains and whatnot.
Very energy intensive to get that meat.
Exactly,
you really have to sort of, work as a collective, develop tools, track animals, make laws, and bring this beast down and then butcher it. So it was a very precious commodity, and obviously that meat wasn't available all the year round. Winter times must have been really a frugal time. On your grains and just get what you could where you could.
I think
I buy all those arguments. I mean, as the years go by, you become more or less sort of like arsey, non-judgmental about other people's diets because it's my personal choice.
Sure.
I don't evangelise about it or sort of put anybody off. I have a 19-year-old daughter who growing up, I never pushed any kind of dietary advice on her because if she wanted to change her diet at any point, that's something she needed to do herself without any kind of cajoling from me.
So did she grow up vegetarian as well?
No, she's just... Oh God, no. She loves meat. Yeah, really, really loves meat.
Yeah.
No, I think it's just a personal thing for me. And again, it could be a logical fallacy, I talk. But I was quite poorly as a child, quite asthmatic and a bad chest, and it was probably coincidental, but it seems to be when I give up the meat, my health seems to improve. So you ascribe that to your diet, and so it almost thinks, well, I'll keep going with this.
But if you're living on a so working class council estate, as I did as well, albeit in a different country, we didn't have a lot of money, so the meat products that we bought were they were cheap because they were intensive farmed animals. So the nutrition was not there. You got chickens that are a couple of weeks old, a couple of months old, before they're turned into food. Even the fruits and vegetables are sort of grown chemically to get them to market as quickly as possible. But if the diet, so at the time the diet is, like I say, it's in a lot of intensely farmed meat products with vegetables as a supplement. If you then switch your diet to high vegetable, high grain, no meat, you would feel better. I can't imagine why you wouldn't feel better, because you're getting all those. In that time, in the 80s, people's diets were horrific, absolutely horrific. And that's led to the problems that we have now. But obviously, so if you go to that vegetarian diet, absolutely, I think it's very possible that you will instantly feel better.
Yeah, that sounds quite plausible. And I think you are more mindful of what you're actually eating, because you've got this restricted diet, so you you do read packets more. You do sort of analyse, gosh, what's this?
Yeah. But and it's not just so as an athlete. So one of our favourite foods on up to marathons, I guess, is the Haribos and the jelly beans and things like that. So you need to look for vegetarian alternatives for those as well, don't you?
Yeah, avoiding gelatin in sweets is it sounds trivial matter. I suppose it is a grand scheme of things, but it's just one of those things you kind of do have to look out for.
Yeah.
Just going to go on to the subject of gelatin, actually, because it's one of those things where, as a vegetarian or a vegan, you're going to come across, because at some point in life, you do pick up a nasty bug and you get prescribed antibiotics.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, those are in gelatin shells.
Yeah.
And I often wonder what form of gelatin that comes from. Is it bovine, porcine?
Mm-hmm.
And if you were a practicing Jew or a Muslim who, dietary beliefs meant you had to provide certain products, how would you know? They're not labeled, it's just gelatin.
Yeah.
So, that's going off the...
No. Well, actually, I can, because I grew up secular Jewish. I can actually answer that.
Right.
From the Jewish perspective, is that, and this might sound a little bit like I'm doing racism, but I'm not. I'm just talking pure fact, is that, so if you live in a Jewish community, you will go to a Jewish doctor. Just naturally, because in Caulfield in Australia and the big cities in America and and London and the outer suburbs of London, where you've got generally different cultures mixed together. So if you're living in that community, chances are you're going to go to a Jewish doctor. But we lived outside of that Jewish community, but my parents sought out a Jewish doctor. So you go to the doctor and they know that you're Jewish and they're Jewish. My doctor had the classic Jewish name, Dr. Isaac Isaacs, and he knew to prescribe, the particular brand that was
right. So when you
kosher, if you like. Yeah.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
That's the answer to the question. Yeah. It's the provenance of some products,
Yeah.
where they derive from.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think with gelatin, people really don't know what it is. It's just basically boiled down skin and bones, and all the stuff that comes off that.
Yeah, and horses' feet, horses' hooves, and all. It's quite. When you think about it, it's quite gross. But then you can take the other side of the argument is, so if we're going to take the meat from the animal, it's right to do with the something with the rest of the animal.
I think the
as well.
argument then goes for sort of wearing leather as well. It's a byproduct of the meat industry, and
that used to be my favourite argument to vegetarians.
I do have a pair of leather shoes knocking about, and I have wore leather, and it is again. I think we've talked about this before, Jess. It's one of the few things that does. Well, it's not. I think a lot of things cause cognitive dissonance, but vegetarianism does, because I don't think you can, even being a vegan must be really hard work to avoid. I mean, there's no death-free diet.
No.
To get your grain, to get your vegetables, you've got to have agriculture.
Yeah.
And that's killing a lot of things.
Of course, yeah.
From worms to birds to more rodents.
Yeah.
The list goes on. You're disturbing a food chain for all animals.
It's killing the planet.
You've just got to sort of do the best with what you can.
Yeah. Well, let's just finish this part off, because I don't want to cut it short, but we will run out of time. But let's just have some final thoughts on vegetarianism and the philosophy behind it.
It's, do we have the right to eat another life form? Clearly, evolution by natural selection, yes.
Yeah.
All living things do. Part of this wonderful web of the food chain. We're part of that. You can't derive an ought from an is. So we're at the position now where we can choose alternative means to get our nutrition. So ideally, do we really have to keep animals in dreadful conditions and then slaughter them? I'd argue no, but also I can see the arguments from we keep pets, we keep them in an unnatural state, they've become dependent on us. I'm getting sort of like flicking around with ideas here now, so it might come across as being a sort of like a bit, gosh, stick to the point.
I'll edit all that out. Don't worry about it. Yeah. You said something before about it's chemicals. So
yeah, I mean, ultimately we're deriving. We need to get our proteins, our carbs. Essentially, we're a life form that needs topping up with certain nutrients, and we get those from various sources. Animals being one, and for the most people, it's the things like protein and iron, which another subject we can come on to if you like. Meat is a rich source of all those things. Sure. To have a good vegetarian diet, you don't necessarily have to supplement, but you have to be mindful that you are getting things like B12, good sources of iron, proteins that are complete, because meat is a complete protein where you've got to things like quinoa and a few other things where all those amino acids are present in that food source.
Did you just say quinoa?
I say quinoa.
Do you mean quinoa?
If you like.
Sorry.
How he's moved from the council estate to quinoa to middle class heights.
What about? So you talked about sci-fi earlier on.
Yeah, sure.
So something we always see on sci-fi, and one of my favourite ones is Firefly. So they've got the food and something they use as currency in Firefly is protein.
Right.
And it's a produced chemical block of protein. Mm-hmm. Where do you think we'll be? How long do you think it will be before we can't sustain, or the planet can't sustain, farming for the population, and we need to go to that complete chemical protein source?
Gosh, that's a really good question. Clearly, things can't go on the way they are. Populations in excess of 7 billion now, a lot of mouths to feed. A lot of land for agriculture, grain and producing animals, lab-grown meat.
Yeah, and that's was it this year or late last year that the first
burger?
Yeah,
it's an odd thing. The question is, would he eat it? Yes, I couldn't find an ethical reason not to. That would just be if it's just cells that have been grown, reproduced, and there's been no sentient being that's had a life cut short. Then why not?
Yeah. Yeah, well, like you say, it's a pile of chemicals. No, somehow those chemicals get into our body to actually keep fueling us. So I think there'll be a time where. So at the moment, the meal is we all sit down to a meal and we have the conversations over. And we go out for meals and that sort of thing. And I think of it might be centuries away, but I think the family meal or the meal itself will become extinct, and it will be much like you plug your phone in to charge it. That's what we'll be doing. We'll be putting energy into our body rather than having a meal. Yeah,
so it's like a recharge session.
Exactly, yeah.
Hey, we're going off for a recharge? Yeah, they got some cool protein blocks down.
Yeah, let's go do that. Okay, well that is about all we have time for today. So look out for later on in the week, as I keep saying, probably Thursday for part 2 of this extra long podcast. So until then, on behalf of myself, Andria and Brenno, thanks for listening, and this has been Skeptic Smash Talk. Are you ready? I can edit bits out.
I'm ready.
I edit a lot of stuff out.
I was eating my omelette.
Oh, sorry, I can't see because it's too dark.
You asked me a question if I was ready.
Yeah.
And the fact that I didn't say yes meant I wasn't ready.
I